Welcome back to NewsMakers. It's a political affair this week. We are with Labour's Clayton, Cosgrove and National's Amy Adams. Also on the health front, by the way, the Ministerial Review Group has come up with a laundry list of ideas on how to reduce bureaucracy and improve frontline health services. Well, that's very much the government's line on this. One of the key recommendations seems to be removing a lot of the duplication that we see amongst the 21 DHBs, more bulk purchasing and so forth. This all looks pretty benign, doesn't it?
The reduction of bureaucracy is interesting, isn't it? Because what they've proposed is to put two other layers, two other agencies, invent them and put them over the top of the DHBs. Do you know how much the bureaucracy costs out of the total health budget?
Too much.
2%. 2%. And you know what the increases are that they crow about? They were, for instance, ward clerks, people on wards doing paperwork.
Why do we have 21 payroll systems,
so nurses and doctors could actually heal you.
Okay.
Now, if we're going to go back to this, the frontline back office stuff's a great slogan, but if it means then that we're going to have doctors and nurses doing their own paperwork, making their own bookings, doing things like that,
can I just get
it won't work. And then you've got two other bureaucracies on top of it, don't you? Which is what they've done.
Can I just get a straightforward answer from you to a simple question?
Sure.
What is the point in 21 different payroll systems?
Well, you may well be able to streamline some of that. That is a good thing. But inventing two more layers, two more agencies over the top. We've now got effectively 23 DHBs. And are we going to go back to having doctors and nurses in wards doing their own bookings, answering their own phones, and doing their own typing?
How can we be sure that we aren't going to just be faced with changing the machinery of bureaucracy, getting rid of a wee bit here and creating a new monster over here?
You can be sure, because the Minister's made it very clear that this is an independent review group, and we will not accept any of their recommendations unless they do reduce bureaucracy and improve frontline services. So we're going to go through what they said, but you're exactly right. There is no point having 21 payroll services. There is no point having 21 IT departments. There is no point doing that. And Clayton's quite wrong when he tries to suggest ward clerks are backroom. They're not. Ward clerks are very much frontline. We see them as an essential part. What we're talking about is getting rid of the duplication and that backroom stuff. You don't need that. Now, if we can consolidate that and get more frontline services from the health budget, we will do it. If any of those recommendations increase bureaucracy, we won't do it. It's as simple as that.
Do you consider the recommendations as a recipe for restructuring?
No. What they are is a recipe for streamlining, exactly as Clayton said, the services that are unnecessarily being duplicated. You did, you just said it right now. Unnecessarily being duplicated in the back offises.
All right.
It's not restructuring as when you start abolishing and amalgamating health boards. We're not doing that. We've made that clear. This is about tidying up. This is about tidying up the back end where there is unnecessary duplication, because we don't need to have these things replicated up and down the country. It's a nice slogan because it's a good idea.
If you look at 2 points, one is it's not an independent report because the Minister himself had to go into Parliament and admit that he got it beforehand, that he edited it up. And secondly, if you look at the key recommendation of Murray Horn, one of the architects of what happened in the 90s, he's talked about a full-scale restructure. Now, I think if you can look for efficiencies, no one argues with that. But if we're going to go back to what we had a decade ago, where this sort of frontline, we're going to have doctors and nurses doing frontline stuff, the ward clerks that I talked about were put in there to do a lot of the medical reporting and paperwork that has to be done so that the doctor and nurse could cut you open and heal you. Now, if we're going to go back to saying, let's get rid of people who pay wages, for instance, and transfer that across, well, you are going to have bureaucracy. Right. And how's getting rid of bureaucracy inventing 2 new agencies at the state?
Time will tell. Now, eyebrows have been raised on a completely different front. This is concerning the sum total of state assistance that some New Zealand families receive. Over 300 households receive over $1,000 a week, and Minister Bennett has ordered an audit of the top 50 recipients to ensure everything is tickety-boo. An interesting comment was made by the Prime Minister on ZB earlier this week. He said that a lot of taxpayers will question the fairness of doling out over $1,000 every week to some families. Should these families be afraid, Clayton?
Well, yeah, they should, but let's get into perspective. If there's a loophole, let's close it. But 310,000 plus families got working for families assistance. Susan St John, who is an eminent academic in this area, said if you've got I think the figures were 8 kids, the estimate for, and you're paying sort of $455 perhaps rent, the estimate to feed those kids could be $300 or $400. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Rather than, I'd be very reluctant to make generalised tax statements like the Minister and the Prime Minister has. If it's 50 out of 100, of course, let's have a look at it. But if you've got 8 or 10 kiddies in a family, and some are, there are families of 8, your costs are huge. There'll be people watching this show.
The cost to the taxpayer is huge though as well, isn't it?
Well, you see, working for families, of course, remember, is a tax credit, getting your own money back, which these guys said was creeping socialism and then kept in.
Yes, well, can I come to Amy on this? Do you have concerns that working for families has actually eroded the incentive for people to get ahead under their own steam?
Because you've got an in-work payment.
Pardon?
We put in an in-work payment, so if you get a job... And remember that unemployment was 3.4%, so it worked. If you got a job, you got more money, an in-work incentive.
Amy?
Well, I'll tell you what, one thing I am concerned about with working for families is the revelations we've seen in the paper just this week, suggesting that there's an awful lot of people getting working for families by cleverly structuring their entitlements so that they're earning less than they're getting. Now, that's something,
rort, isn't it?
It is a rort, and that I don't have any time for. And frankly, the way the system was set up encouraged them to do it.
What about these big breeders on the welfare state?
Well, look, I mean, this is an area I actually have some agreement with what Clayton's saying. We have to be careful that people are not rorting the system, and if there are people who are, we need to look at that. And that's where the review of the top 50 is looking at. We're making sure they're not getting anything more than they're entitled to. But we do have to say, look, I'm quite proud of the fact we live in a country where we provide assistance for people at the level that they need it. Not everyone's needs are the same, and you do have to look at it on need. But I will say that I have a lot of support and a lot of sympathy for the people who are working very hard, 50, 60 hours a week to feed their family, looking at that number and thinking that looks like a big number. But we're not going to start saying there is a one-size-fits-all category in support.
Can I get a comment from you about a case that Paula Bennett cited? One couple getting $1,200 a week. Both parents have been on the dole for more than 15 years, but they've been very busy breeding. They've got 10 children. Now, I wonder why she highlighted that case. What is the inference?
Well, I don't know what the inference is, but the position is this. Under our system, you're assessed on the basis of your individual need. Now, I think it's appropriate that the public knows if that's the sort of payments that are being made. It is state money, it is taxpayer money, and any time there's taxpayer money going out, the public has a right to know. Now, the public may have views on that, and I'm sure they will share them with us.
Clayton,
if they're getting more than they're entitled to, then we need to look at it.
Do you think Paula Bennett has quite rightly cited this as a case of the welfare gravy train? That drives people nuts.
Well, it's Paula Bennett's tactics are to pull a case. We don't have any detail, do we? You don't have any detail. I don't. Amy doesn't. The minister's pulled one out of the books and thrown it out there, so you now as a journalist are posing these questions. We don't know what the personal circumstances.
We know they've been on the dole for 15 years and they've got 10 kids.
We don't know what their expenses are. We don't know why they've been on the dole for 15 years.
Had 10 kids,
so, to pull it out and just throw it out there, again, a great little political slogan, gets you fired up, gets the viewers fired up, but it lacks a bit of detail. Well, if it was put out there appropriately, because Paula was very good at exposing the personal circumstances when it suited her of beneficiaries. So, well, that's a fact. But as a lawyer, I'm surprised you adhere to that. But she hasn't put any detail out here, has she? Of family, 10 kids, on dole, $1,000 a week, leave it there and let it fester away.
You know the bigger issue? The bigger issue there is that they've been on the dole for 15 years. That's what we have to address. We have to address people who are on the dole for a long period of time because it's not good for them, it's not good for their family, it's not good for the next generation. What we have to be targeting is making sure people don't end up in that long-term unemployed category, because even Clayton, I'm sure, would have to agree that's not in anyone's best interest to be in that position.
And
what we've got to target
and that's why
is
we're
getting people out of that cycle of long-term
jobs a week,
dependency.
and that's why no one's being trained. Isn't that an interesting dichotomy that's happened in the last 9 months?
We will take a break as Clayton draws breath. We'll be back very shortly.